Man, that is slow setting up.
Has anyone else in the Orth household been tested?
I can't remember.
I don't remember what Ben said about that. I think I think he contacted them about it, and they were told by the health district, oh, you don't qualify for that. You can't get the test or something like that.
Rapid testing?
Yeah. So I don't know if he was going to be able to go back to school. It's fun. The funny thing is she tests positive and then gets a call from the school that, oh, she can come back to class the next day.
What?
It's like, he's like, I didn't understand. He didn't understand that.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense unless it was more than 10 days ago that she had symptoms, I guess.
I guess, yeah. Okay, here we go. Ready? Okay.
Let's do it.
I need a straw. Nobody makes coffee with a straw. Okay, so we're going to be in the workbook. We're on chapter 7, the Greek sentence. And they add, and I don't remember if I added these. Let me pull up, oh, come on, where is it here? Share my screen.
You did not add them. Well, unless you have updated notes since last time I downloaded them.
Okay, I get it. There we go. So, so we're looking at the nature of a Greek. Well, let's go through our lesson book. So we have some supplemental vocabulary that Mr. Sawyer adds here, or Mr. Cox adds, excuse me, to our lesson. And so we have he dikaiasune, which is righteousness. Dikaiasune and he, that add definite article. Ego, which is I. If you ever taken a psychology class, you learn about the we say in English the ego, but it comes from this. I, me is the verb, I am. I think we've already met with estin, which is the he, she, or it is. In, we've talked about this a little bit before. This is the preposition in, which I believe the next chapter is going to look at prepositions. Pneuma is the word spirit. Pneumatos is the genitive form of this. It's a different form. We haven't got to that. You can see it's chapter 19. But that's the word for spirit, whether it's unclean spirit, human spirit, or the Holy Spirit. Always determined by context. Kara, hey, kara is joy. So, going back through these then, the first question we have there is blank is word formation. Remember, accidents, not accidents with a T, but with a C at the end of it, accidents. And so that involves, as it says there, prefixes and suffixes of words that we use in understanding, translating those. Okay, then we come to the word related primarily to this idea of sentence, and that is that blank is the orderly arrangement of words, the relationship to one another.
Syntax.
Syntax. And I actually looked this up in the New Testament. There's 3 places in the Gospels there when Jesus sends the disciples to set up the Passover at the end of his life. And it says they went and did as they were arranged or as they were directed. It's soon tasso. Tasso meaning to put it in order, and soon put things in order together. And that's what they were supposed to do. So this is the arrangement of words. Okay, in the event that a given word has more than one meaning, how do you translate the word within a sentence?
By context is what I said.
By context. That is the right answer. So I put up a word up here. This is, when you learn basic Greek, our verb, normally they work verbs off of the verb luo. And luo, when you learn it, has two meanings. I loose or I destroy. I'm going to stop sharing this for just a minute so that everybody else can see this. So luo, our verb, I loose or I destroy. How would you determine that? By context. So if you had something that was bound and you loosed it, that would make sense. If you had something that, as a result of your actions, it was destroyed. A lot of people say that there's a connection between these two, that you destroy things by setting them loose, setting a bound thing loose so that it was obliterated. But nonetheless, context is what's going to determine which one of those you're going to use. That's an example out of the basic verb that we use for doing verbal conjugations in Greek when you learn the basic conjugation. So context, yeah, context always determines word meaning. And just one other comment on that. Every once in a while you'll come across a word that 99.9% of the time, this is the meaning of the word, but it's going to occur in a passage in which, if you look it up and if you know that word, you're going to go, what does that mean? That's not that word. And so then you'll look up some information. There's different ways you can research these kind of things. You're going to find that word, and sometimes I think what happens is the translators are put in a situation, and because the meaning of that word does not in their mind fit what's being said by their interpretation, they think, well, the word then should mean this. Case in point is and this actually happens more often than not, but it's the word charis, which is the word grace. And there's a lot of times you're going to find passages in which the translators have translated it thanks. Now, charis, grace, Eucharistia, thanks. Eucharisteo, to give thanks. So we can see we get our word thanks from the word charis, but I don't think in a number of those passages, I don't think thanks is the right meaning. I think it's that the translators don't understand what the writers are trying to say. And so they go with thanks because it seems to make more sense. You have a few of those in the book of 1 Peter, where it should be grace. So you just to be aware that sometimes you're going to have a word and people are going to think context means it means this, but it really, I think they don't understand the context. That's my opinion. And I think it's opinion that some others have, because there's places where they will comment on that the translators have this, but the context doesn't really bear that out, because I think they have a different understanding. 7.3 then, a blank is an independent clause. It may also contain other clauses, phrases, various kinds of structures. That's a sentence. Okay. So a sentence is a clause, but it can contain other clauses. I think I mentioned this last time, that you can have independent clauses, but you also then have dependent clauses that don't really stand well on their own. Conditional clauses, where if this is true, then this, and you need that interplay between the if and the then. And yet they all make up one sentence. Phrases, I think we understand phrases are like participial phrases. You know, if you took junior high and high school English, you learned participial phrases. The ones being sent. Said to John. I was just reading that in Luke. The ones being sent, they were sent from John, so they said to Jesus. So the ones being sent is a prepositional phrase that's functioning as the subject of the verb said, and then John is or Jesus is in the dative there. So you can have phrases like that. prepositional phrases, participial phrases. 7.3, a blank and a blank constitute the most elementary form of a sentence.
Subject and a predicate.
Subject and a predicate. So you need some sort of a subject, some sort of a predicate to constitute that. Now, that brings up the issue here, number 3, in Greek, one-word sentences occur. How do you know the subject of a verb if there is no noun or any substantive in the sentence?
I said the personal ending of the verb.
Personal ending of the verb, yeah. So you don't need a separately written noun to function as the subject in the sentence. All you need is the verb to communicate that. Sometimes, however, we've already seen that we can't have verbless clauses, verbless sentences, because we can have a subject and then we can have a modifying adjective that functions as a substantive. So we could say, God is light, and we could just say God light. And we could have something like that. 7.4. Many Greek sentences are simple statements with a
noun and a verb.
Noun and a verb. Okay. So we don't have to have a lot of other additions to this. Occasionally, Greek sentences have proper nouns that are accompanied by the
article.
Yeah, but we don't translate the article all the there's a lot of times in the New Testament we don't translate the article because it just does not make good English. It's very awkward English. I think there are places where even though the article is awkward English, I think when you're teaching the Bible, if you understand in some passages the significance of that article, I think you need to point that out to people, to say that there's something very, you don't have to say there's a different article with you, but you need to say the Greek text makes this something very specific here. And you try to draw that out, make that clear. The next one, a sentence with a blank and a blank has a linking verb connecting the subject to a substantive in the predicate.
Predicate nominative.
Okay, predicate nominative. Okay. Now, the predicate nominative sentence that I believe that we have had This is the last clause. This is the last clause of John 1:1. Okay, so 1:1c. There's 3 clauses that make up that whole sentence there. Which word is the verb in this case? We have learned this particular verb.
Ain.
Ain. This is the imperfect verb was, or because it's imperfect, we'd say was being, because that's the idea of that. Now, this is this is our linking verb. Is, are, am, was, be. I should have Peggy see if she could do those, because she used to have that list memorized of all those linking verbs. Back many years ago, I remember she used to be able to rattle those off. I was always impressed by that. But we have 2 nominatives. Theos is nominative and logos is nominative. So how do we know which one of these is the subject?
The one with the article.
The one with the article. So we find the article here. This one then is the subject. So when we translate it, we have to bring this forward, because in English, if you translate it like this, it wouldn't communicate the same thing. So we have to say the word was, we'll just keep it simple, but it was being, was God. Okay, the word is God. So this is a predicate nominative. It's a substantive functioning as a predicate nominative here. That is the second part then of a sentence here that has this linking verb.
I see. Okay. We're using grammatical verbiage, and sometimes it makes me confused. So what it's saying is that the predicate of the sentence is in the nominative.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because you're using a linking verb. So you're saying, in this case, technically you're saying this was this, or this is this. And because you're saying is, whatever this thing is, that also has to match the same case as the subject of the sentence. They have to have the same case in that case. So that's why this is in the nominative and this is in the nominative.
Because it's acting kind of like it's a descriptive.
It is. It's clarifying. It's clarifying what this is. It's not just saying that the word was existing. It's saying that the word was existing in the character of God. That's what it is. So the word was, as to its very character, we would say God, deity. Whatever was true of God in the last clause, middle clause here, is true of this one who is the word. Pardon me?
Equal sign. Equal sign.
Equal sign. Equal sign. Yeah. Oh, let's try that here. So we'd say the word. There it is. The word equal to God. There you go. Except I didn't get it all wiped out with my finger. What?
Whatever you have on one side is the same thing on the other side.
That's right. The only situation we have is because this does not have a definite article, this has to stay over here. There is another construction in which both of them have a definite article, and they can switch. They could, what you say over here, you could flip the whole sentence around and it still would make legitimate sense. But when only one of them has it, that one technically has to function as the subject in Greek. Okay. So in a sentence with a predicate nominative, the blank is accompanied by the article.
Oh, sorry. Where are we at?
Oh, the bottom of the page.
The subject.
The subject. Okay, that's right. The subject is. Okay, some sentences have a direct object and or indirect object. Okay, so how are you going to identify a direct object in the sentence? What case are you looking for?
Accusative.
The accusative case. The accusative case is the case of the object or direct object. What case are you going to look for the indirect object?
Lid.
The lid case, and specifically the dative, but it's the lid form, exactly.
Is it always the dative?
If it's indirect object, it's going to always be dative, because dative is the form of reception or interest, whereas the locative is looking at the location, and instrument is looking at how a thing is done. So neither one of those express an indirect object. Remember, the indirect object would be if it says I throw a ball. Ball is it would be in Greek would be in the accusative, but I throw the ball to Peggy. Peggy would then in the Greek have to be in the dative or the lid form. Right. But if I had a building called Peggy, if I could say I throw the ball in Peggy. Now I'm doing it inside of it. That doesn't make any sense. If let's say I'm not capable of throwing the ball, but she's doing it for me. If you ever played one of those silly games where you're supposed to tell that other person what to be doing, and I'd say I throw the ball by means of Peggy, then I tell her to throw it to whatever, sure. You know. So now I'm using her. So that would, but we don't have those kind of situations very often. So it's still the dative is the only case that really functions as an indirect object. Okay, next question or statement. Remember that modifiers, such as definite articles and adjectives, must agree with a noun that they modify in
case, number, and gender.
Case, number, and gender. And that's in gender. I don't think the book points out gender, but remember, gender is important because you can have first declension nouns that have a first declension ending, but they are masculine nouns, such as the word disciple. A sentence, a blank sentence, has two or more independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction.
Compound.
A compound sentence. Compound sentence. Yeah. Boy, that's You can remember junior high or high school English. I mean, we learned those kind of things even in English. A blank sentence has a main or independent clause and one or more dependent clauses.
Complex.
That's complex sentence. So a compound is Tim ate the pizza and Peggy washed the dishes. That would be a compound sentence. But a complex sentence then would be Tim made a mess in the kitchen, therefore Peggy had to clean it up, or Tim had to clean it up, and something like that. That would be complex because they're therefore. So you have one thing that's stating what happened, and then there'd be a separate conclusion that comes based on that. Okay. So we're going to go over, because it does tell us here at this point to review Sawyer's 8 points in translating a Greek sentence. And let's see if we can remember the first thing when you are translating a Greek sentence. First thing you're supposed to do is you're supposed to find what? Identify what?
The verb.
Find the verb. What if you don't have a verb in a sentence?
It seems like you should find the subject.
Then you should find the subject, because that's the second thing. The first thing you do is find the verb. The verb is going to be there, but you're going to have verbless clauses once in a while. So then the second thing you find is the subject. Even if you've identified the verb, the next thing you do is find the subject. How do you find the subject? How do you know which one is the subject?
The nominative case and or the nominative case with the definite article.
That's right. There you go. So we identify the subject. Sometimes you're going to identify a subject and it's going to have a adjective attached to it. And they're going to be verbless, and we've already talked about that. And so that might be a case where you don't have the main verb. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to look and you're going to see, is there a direct object, something that the action is being done to. Again, I'm throwing the ball. How are you going to identify a direct object?
The accusative case.
You're looking for a noun. You're looking for something that's in the accusative case. Exactly. You also want to look to see, is there an indirect object in the sentence? Now, can you have, let me ask this. Could you have a sentence in which you have an indirect object without a direct object? The answer is yes.
You're saying yes.
Yeah, because I could simply say, I talked to Robin. So now all of a sudden, now you're the indirect object. It's not saying what I'm saying. So I'm not saying I'm talking. I'm not saying I'm giving a book. I'm saying I'm talking. I'm speaking. So speaking is the verb. I am the subject, and you're the one that's receiving whatever it is I'm talking. In that case, okay. So you can have a sentence that has an indirect object but not an object. There's an object implied, and that there's something that's being said, but we're not saying what it is. We're just simply saying he's talking. And I was reading some of those in Luke this morning here, where Jesus is talking to other people, talking to the disciples of John the Baptist and speaking to the crowds, turns to the crowds and says to the crowds. And then it does tell us what he says. I've not found such great faith in all Israel. So you're looking first the direct object, the thing that the action's being done to. I'm throwing the ball, or you're looking for the indirect object, the thing that is then the reception of that object, or the reception of the action in terms of I'm speaking to such an individual. Then you're going to search for phrases or clauses that add meaning to the sentence. So after you identify the main parts, here's a verb, here's a subject, here's a direct object if there's one, here's the indirect object. Then you're going to look for things that are going to add and expand that. Now we haven't added a lot of these other phrases and clauses at this time, but you might have a prepositional phrase, you might have a participial phrase. And you're going to be adding those, and you're going to figure out where those are attached to the other information in the book. So participial phrase. I speak to the man, participial phrase, standing in the house. Now, maybe that's saying I'm standing in the house. Maybe he's standing in the house. I actually know when we get to participles, you'll be able to tell whether it's talking about me standing in the house or him standing in the house, because it's going to match either the nominative case, and so the participle will have that too. So you're going to have phrases like that that are going to expand what you're looking at. And so then you're looking at the forms of verbs and nouns. Because we have the case system, you really have to be paying attention to the endings and looking at these cases and saying, okay, this could be this. You get the lid case, there's three possibilities. You're just going to have to go through your head. Is this location? Is this talking about how it's done, the means? Is it talking about the one that's receiving the action? You're doing those kind of things. But you're also looking at just all those aspects. And you're going to eventually be doing the same thing when you're looking at verbs. Is that with verbs, you're going to be considering the form of the verb, who's involved in what action in the verb. And then the next point, which is we've kind of already touched in terms of word meaning, you're going to translate all the verbs, substantives, all these phrases, all these clauses. You're going to put all this together, but you're going to translate it within the context of the sentence. And not just the context of the sentence, but the context of the paragraph or the whole letter. If you're reading a New Testament letter or a New Testament book, you're going to find that that word or that expression is used in a certain way. Kurt, this was really interesting. Kurt, I don't know if you know who Kurt and Christina Anderson are, but they were friends of ours. They've come over and helped do mission teams over here in Royal City a few times.
From the Shine Group?
Yeah. They were youth leaders for a while there. They live over on the west side. But anyway, he was talking to me when he came over. He says, have you ever noticed in 1 John how John uses the expression, by this, by this. And there's an order that John puts it in that is not the same as other writers use that same expression. And I was like, to me, it was really interesting they brought that out, because I'd probably seen it only maybe a couple, 2 or 3 months before when I was working on something out of 1 John. So it's always kind of nice when you're working at it, you're going, oh, that's very interesting. And somebody else comes along and they've picked up on this, and then the two of you can kind of talk through this idea. But that was a thing that was determined by context, the way you handled that. Okay. And then, of course, then with context, when you get down to word meaning, is realizing that there is what we call a range of meanings. The fancy Greek word when you talk about linguistics is they call semantic range. But just all we have to say is there's a range of meanings, which we've already talked about. So the example they use here is angel may mean messenger or angel. Now, I would actually disagree. I think it always means messenger, because that's what an angel is. This is a messenger. We've just become very accustomed to referring to them as angels, which doesn't really help people, because then people get a different idea in their mind rather than understanding. Technically, an angel is a spirit, and they're sent on the job of being a messenger. That's one of the number one ways that they relate to us as human beings. But I believe that angels have other responsibilities with God other than just being messengers. They're not just sending messages back and forth to us and back and forth to each other. There's other things that God, in fact, in Scripture, when God refers to those frequently as a group, he refers to them as armies. He does that in the Old Testament, and he does that in the New Testament. In fact, it was very interesting. In the 2020 edition of the New American Standard Bible, I just came across this yesterday, that there's a place where they used to translate host, the host of heaven. And they don't translate. They translated armies. This was in Luke, talking about the angels that appeared to the shepherds when Jesus was born. And because armies is what the word means. And that actually kind of gives an interesting twist on what these beings do. In fact, you go to the book of Revelation in chapter 12, and you have, it says, the devil and his angels warred with Michael and his angels. So they're not just messengers all the time. They're messengers, but they're also, in some way or another, carrying out other activities. But having said all that, yeah, you're going to have to look at the range of meanings. And then it will help you to diagram the Greek sentence to determine the relationship between elements. And we did not spend, because I don't think, we have some real basic stuff you could work on learning this idea of what you do when you diagram. Diagramming is actually basics of diagram, which we didn't go over last time. Let me erase this and let me just show you the basics of what you do when you diagram. And we'll start with English. Diagramming starts with a baseline for the main clause. And then you divide the subject from the predicate by one vertical line that has to come through this. So we could say our subject is man. But in the Greek, or in English even, we'd say the man. We don't put the up there, we put it down here because it's modifying man. The man, go back to our idea, our verb throws. And then if we're going to add a predicate out here, a direct object throws, the thing I keep using is a ball. So he throws a ball, and remember that this modifies. Now, oh, I didn't do that right. Let's go straight up with that. Now that doesn't go below the line because it's not dividing subject and predicate. So the man throws a ball. Okay. But if we take our sentence that we had from John 1:1, where we would say the word was God, we would have here logos. It has a definite article, so we put that down here. This line that goes all the way through here. So this is our main clause line, a line that separates the subject from the predicate. This is for supporting material. That's what these hang underneath here, Richard. But the idea of a diagram is there's my main subject. Then I have my main verb, in this case, aim. Now, because this is a subject that has a predicate nominative, the line is not straight, the line is angled. That is telling you that what is on this side is related to this. This is telling you it's the direct object. This is telling you that this is related. So we have theos over here. Okay. So that's the basics of what we're looking at. We have our subject here, always your subject. Then we have our verb, and then we have our predicate, whatever it is. And if it's a predicate nominative, which means this is in the nominative case, this is in the nominative case, and they have to have a linking verb, is, are, am, was, be, need, been. Have to have one of those in here. Then we lead this line here to tell us that this is equivalent to this. This is not equivalent. The ball and the man are not equivalent. The ball is the thing that the man is acting upon. Okay. Now, you can add one other element here. You can add an indirect object. And an indirect object is going to hang down from here because it's modifying again. What?
Doesn't have the verb, doesn't it?
Oh, is that what they're telling you to do, is put the indirect object? They are telling you to do that. Okay. See, this isn't uniform, I can tell you that, because I've got different books and I've done this, and sometimes I put it over there. But yeah, so we put this, so the man throws the ball to the boy. We're going to add the word to, the preposition to. There's going to be a little line to separate the preposition from that.
Nope.
To the boy, and then this is going to be the underneath it, to the boy. What? Oh, did they tell you to do it differently under here?
They have you do the noun first and then underneath that is the.
Well,
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's what here is the, choice. Choice is the definite article.
because
So
in
you put the
Greek,
definite article, just like here, you put it under the noun, so you put it under the noun here. But the preposition, which that one doesn't have a preposition here, they just left it out because it's in Greek. There's no preposition supplied. It's implied in the fact that it's in the dative case. He teaches to the crowd, he teaches the crowds. So this is the base, this is the basis. Baseline, a line that separates subject from the predicate, and then you add this other material. There's a lot, trust me, these can become very complicated. But their structure, I still use this to this day, that when I've got Greek texts that I have problems with, I will still go through and I will diagram the whole sentence. And sometimes it takes 2 pages to go through and diagram a set of verses so that I can visually see and really think through how those words are all related. And sometimes it still doesn't solve your problem. My Greek professor, Peggy knew well, Dale used to tell us when you come into class and you're fighting for your diagram, he goes, just remember your diagram's not inspired. The text is inspired. What you're doing, because essentially your diagram is an interpretation of the material. So you're interpreting it. But there are some things that are not interpreted. There are some things that just say, well, this is definitely subject. This is definitely the verb. This is definitely the object. But there are then some other details in there. But usually it isn't not all that hard. It's just a matter of you and your mind connecting all this. If you want a fun sentence, which we had to do in seminary to diagram, it's Ephesians 1:3 through verse 13. It's all one sentence. It's a really, really long sentence. In fact, Ephesians has like 5 of those long sentences in the book of Ephesians that are really long. Okay, so those are our main points. Always start when you're translating a sentence, when you come to Greek, look for the verb, look for the subject, and then look and see, is there a direct object? Is there an indirect object? And you work from there. So those are the key points, key things I would say primarily to keep in mind when you start translating. Okay, so with that, I'm going to do one last thing before we're done. We are going to do the one sentence I gave here. It's extremely easy sentence that we have in the workbook on page 45.
extremely easy.
Well, I mean, it's not, they haven't.
There's no new vocabulary words in it? Is that what you meant by extremely easy?
For the most part, but there is one curveball that they throw at us in this thing.
Yes.
And what is that curveball in this sentence?
There's no verb.
There's no verb, which we've already learned that in the previous lessons we learned that. Well, let's look at it. What are the subject nouns in here? We have
Hoi adelphoi
okay,
and hoi douloi.
Oidulai. Those are our subject nouns. They're both in the nominative case. So what do we do with protoi and eskatoi? What are they?
Adjectives.
They're adjectives, okay? But what case are they in?
Nominative.
Which they should be, because they're
Describing the adelphoi and the douloi.
very, very good. So what do we do since we don't have a verb? We learned this in the previous lesson when we were talking about adjectives.
They're being used predicatively, so we supply the verb is, but in this case, are, because they're plural.
Okay. So
hoi adelphoi protoi is the brothers are first, and hoi douloi eskatoi is the slaves are last.
okay. Let's take this down. So I'm going to do this in a diagram form just to kind of use this idea of how this happens here. So we have adelphoi. Our line separating the subject from the predicate. And then we have a predicate substantive. In this case, it's an adjective functioning as a substantive here. We draw this line here, and we have protoi. Okay, so adelphoi, protoi. What do we put in here? We put in the verb are. When you supply, in Greek, when you supply a word that you need in English to make sense, thank you. You put it in parentheses. Thank you, Peggy. You put it in parentheses so that you remember that's actually not part of the text. That's something I've supplied to make sense in English. What?
It's in there.
Oh, it actually says that in the book. Okay. See, I don't. Here's the paper. Okay. Now, there's one other thing that we're going to add as terms of diagram. In this case, because we have two separate sentences, kind of in a compound sense, we just put a dash line here, and we put the chi out here. And now we do our second line. We have douloi. We're going to put our R in right from the beginning because we already have done this. And then eschatoi. Eschatoi. So brothers are first, and it's actually, we should put this definite article. Boy. So the brothers are first, and the slaves are last. Okay. We've already talked about that. Eschatoi. So what part of speech is eschatoi?
Also an adjective.
It's an adjective, and its case is?
Nominative also.
Okay. And its number is plural, gender is?
Oh, I'm sorry. We are doing this whole thing. Yes.
Sorry.
It's plural, lexical form, eschatos, second declension, right? Is that right?
Yes. Okay.
So I put a question mark in there.
And it's functioning in the sentence, as it says function in the sentence. What is that?
To describe the slaves.
Describes the slaves. And it also is functioning as a substantive in the way it is, but yes, it's describing the slaves. Okay. So there we go. Key things to remember a sentence. So keep going over these. Look for the verb. Look for the subject in the nominative case. Then look for direct object, indirect object, and then other material. So that's the base way to start. And you need to do that because I've been trying to read through Luke this week again, and you get sentences in there where, if you just start at the first word and you just start reading, it doesn't make sense because the subject is at a different location, something like that in Greek. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen, and so you just get in the habit of looking through things, and I've been reading Greek for a long time, and I still will do that. I'll read them, boy, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, well, duh, that's not the nominative case there. It started out with something different. What am I doing? So, any questions to close here?
Do you want us to be diagramming the sentences as we're translating them from here on out, or is that just if it's helpful for you?
If it's helpful for you, I was just trying to illustrate that because they talked about diagramming, and I think it helps you. It can visually help you see the structure of what it is you're translating. And so that's, like I said, I still use diagramming, and that, well, that's right, you didn't get to go that day. The day I went out and met those the mission people for Josh and Faye from the church down there in Southern California. Their Bible study, they've got a Greek professor that sits in there. And he's 80 years old, still teaches Greek, and he still everyday diagrams sentences, even though he's been teaching Greek for many, 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 many years. So he still finds it to be helpful.
Linda Dorsing took a Greek class a couple of years ago,
And one of her classmates said that as a devotional practice, she parses a sentence from the Greek New Testament every day, just to sit with the text and
Mhm.
see what God was really saying.
Yeah, well, it's a good exercise. It makes you think through these things. I would say probably most days I spend time reading. I try to encourage other people to be reading the Bible. So one of the things I do when I sit is not just to read stuff I'm studying, but to have a section of scripture that I'm reading through. And it's a good habit. So, okay, well, we'll close this off.